Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today I'm bringing you a Kickstarter preview of Burning Banners, Rage of the Witch Queen from Compass Games. Now, this is a sponsored preview video, and there's less than 24 hours left to back this campaign, so I'm going to do my very best to quickly set up exactly what Burning Banners is, talk about some of the elements in this game, specifically the advanced gameplay modes that I haven't seen other content creators highlight as much, to indicate what's different about Burning Banners and why you might want to pay attention to it if you're just getting into wargames or if you're already a wargamer. And of course, redirect your attention to the link in the top of the video description to swing over and back this before it's too late. Now, Burning Banners is a head-to-head dueling wargame with a fantasy theme pasted over top, but the heart and soul of this is really a strategic, chip-based war game. You're going to be moving units across a board with various different hand-drawn maps, each that either contain their own little smaller battles based off scenarios that we have here in the campaign book, or that can spread out into this massive 6-faction showdown, displaying the different wars and conflicts that have happened with the different races and tribes that exist across this board. It's a fascinating take on how you bring a war game and put a fantasy world and theme and skin over top of it and make it feel like you're actually playing these different factions and abilities. Here's the cool thing. Instead of having the same units and armaments and just working through strategy to face off against each other, every single one of these factions, you have the Oathkeepers, the Goblins, the Orcs, the Army of the Night, the Eastern Empire, and the Fjordsland units. Each one of these factions have their own unique history, the way that they interact with the landscape here, their own story that's built into the mountains and the forests and the plains of this valley that you're viewing here. And they also have their own way of operating and playing, their own win conditions, their own way of getting resource and gold, and their own way of fighting and battling other opponents across the board. The artwork is gorgeous, the landscape is expansive, and the campaign book gives you a lot of different scenarios to play, all the way from a small two-player head-to-head duel to, like I said, a 2 versus 2 or 3 versus 3 6-player campaign where every faction that's in this box is included here on the board for you to face off against. Now, the heart and soul of Burning Banners is going to be unit movement across the board, gaining resources to complete one of various objectives. Some units want to burn down every village. If you're playing the Orcs or the Goblin Horde, they kind of need to continue, well, burning, pillaging, and getting more servants to create more minions to spread out across the land. If you're playing other groups, like the Eastern Empire, for instance, they want to balance the scale a little bit. They want to keep from their own power and their own authority from falling apart. They already kind of control this region, but the reality is that the larger an empire gets, the more risky and harder it is for it to maintain its position. Every one of these factions will interact in the board in a unique way. Now, to start playing, you'll open up the campaign book and you'll decide which scenario you want to play. We have the introductory campaign, the invasions of Dreadfield, we have Fight to the Death, we have the Jarl's War, and a lot of various different scenarios. They'll tell you a map, one of these 4 hand-drawn maps to place down onto the board, what factions and special units you're going to be using, and what scenario-specific flavor text, story, and mechanics you'll incorporate into the gameplay that you're playing. Now, there are 2 versions of Burning Banners. There's the basic introductory version, which is actually a very crunchy game experience, but it's much easier to get up and running and doesn't give you too much analysis paralysis opportunities. And there's the advanced play mode, which gets much closer to what most traditional wargamers would expect out of this, and what a lot of people who aren't traditional wargamers are probably looking for. Myself, I love mixing in heroes, magic, and monsters onto the table. It gives me the opportunity to feel like I'm in a living and expanding world, It allows me to use cool spells and abilities to advance my own personal strategy, and heroes just give you that extra oomph. All of those come with the advanced mode of Burning Banners, which I think is where most people end up playing this game after they've played the introductory starting mode a few times. Now, like I said, chip-based movement based off of a scenario. What makes chip-based movement here in this game interesting? Well, first off, it's really extremely accessible. You see, all the information you need to run the game is actually here on the board in front of us. We have our unit map, and if you set aside the pile of cards in front of me, which come from the advanced mode, the basic mode is going to be run more or less by getting gold and resources, understanding where you can spawn and place down your units, paying the gold cost in the top left corner for them, and then combating with each other based off of the dice values that you see in the top right corner. You're going to be rolling white 6-sided dice and black 8-sided dice to determine your hits. You'll be rolling at the same time, fighting against each other, and whoever has hits will either take off a unit or flip a unit over, showing that they're damaged. You can then pay the gold cost to rejuvenate or bring them back to life if you have the money and the time between then and when they encounter another combat. And outside of that, it comes down to movement and strategic play. Now, every character has their own movement rules down in the bottom left-hand corner, which will be a number that's indicated. And depending on where they are on the board and how they start their movement, whether they're on a road or a river or a valley, a port, they'll be able to move a little bit farther, a little bit quicker, and have special customized rules per faction. These rules are fairly straightforward, they're not overly complex, and with that, you can really start playing the game. You just move, attack, and try to outposition, invest in the right resources, the right units, and try to flank or take down or control whatever your scenario is presenting to you. If you've never played a war game before, this one is one that I would be paying attention to. It's easy, accessible to get down to the table, has gorgeous artwork laid out in front of me, a really, really inviting and invigorating campaign story with fantastic flavor text that provides just a spark of engagement, and honestly presents you with a theme that's different from what most war games tend to present you with. A lot of them are going to be militaristic or historical. And this is historical and militaristic, but it's dealing with things like goblins and dwarves and mages instead of, well, World War I and World War II and Germans and Russians and, anti-tank missiles that were invented in the 1940s. Nothing wrong with those games, but this might be a little bit easier to convince you and your friends to sit down at the table and play. You might be able to trick a few of them into playing a head-to-head war game before they realize what they're doing, and then they'll discover they're having fun with it. So, a few of the elements that I think are different from what a lot of other content creators have talked about. Now, there are some other content creators that have done content here on Burning Banners. Specifically, we have the Dice Tower with Mark Streed, and we have the Brothers Murph with BGG and a gameplay over on their own channel. You should go check out those videos. It'll give you better context for what's happening here, and they dive into some of the nuance and the basic gameplay that helps you understand the flow and operation of play. But some of the things I don't think they highlighted as much is how each one of these factions function differently and how you incorporate advanced mode into your actual gameplay style, which are two things that I think are really important to understanding why Burning Banners stands out in this product line. So, the factions. I love good stories. I love stuff that lets me pull into the character and play as if I'm really operating as them. And this game does that. Not only is the flavor text and story arcs of each character and each faction invigorating, but also they each play slightly unique to their own mechanic system. Let's start up here with the Oathbringers. The Oathborn, not Oathbringers, Oathborn. The Oathborn are your dwarves. The core way that they operate is by spreading out from the mountains. They do get an advantage there, potentially placing down a hidden keep that is a lost dwarven archive full of treasures and riches and gold, but primarily spreading out and mining the mountains to gain resources. They have a different economy from the rest of the game board. They're strong, they're beefy, they're small, and can hack an axe through someone in front of them, but they also want to control the mountain ranges, and they want to be able to generate coin every round of the game. The goblins and the orcs are going to play fairly similar. They spawn onto the edges of the board, and the heart and soul of both of these factions is burning and pillaging. You're going to have some very powerful units, some very interesting heroes, but what they're trying to do is always maintain momentum. They want to light a village on fire, take the citizens prisoner to convert them into more of their own units, and then continue spreading across the board. The moment they lose their pillaged areas is the moment they lose the game. So you as the defenders are trying to snuff out the fires that they've created, and they're trying to keep them burning as bright and as long as possible. The Army of the Night, the other, what would say, evil faction that's here on the board, is fascinating. The Army of the Night is going to approach the game board by placing down cults that you don't really want to interact with immediately as a player. You spread them from village to village, and they give you resource and gold back. They're investing in your army. And then at some point, you'll flip the switch, converting all of those areas into places where you can spawn, create, and spread your influence across the board. The Army of the Night is like a slow-growing fungus. It wants to be everywhere, and then in a moment appear. Fun to play, hard to manage, and always feels very threatening to other players because they see you popping up and they have to decide, do they want to go deal with you and snuff out your cult areas that are giving you resource and giving you gold, or do they want to leave you alone while a bigger threat is spreading across the board like the orcs or the goblins? And the Army of the Night is really good at spreading their influence to areas where no one's really paid attention yet, sometimes drawing the attention of the battle to a whole different area of the table. Eastern Empire. Eastern Empire is going to be a little bit more straightforward. They are the dominant power force here on the board as it is. They control everything, technically. Except, like I said earlier, the larger an empire grows, the more likely it is to start fracturing and falling apart at the seams. Rome learned that the hard way, and the Eastern Empire here is learning that as you play the game, you're going to be rolling to see if different sections and factions of your own troops and units are deciding to disband. Depending on how your political environment goes and how much gold you spend to keep the population happy, you're going to either fall apart and lose dramatically or maintain balance just long enough to wrest control back over the warring factions that are appearing across the table. Yeah, you have to defend the infrastructure from orcs and goblins and the Army of the Night, but honestly, the knight over there, he thinks that him and his village should really just go it alone. Are they going to break off? Are you going to allow them to do that? Or are you going to pay them gold to keep them as part of your team in your camp? Finally, the Fjordland. The Fjordland are your seafaring folks. Now, there is rules for river movement, defense across fighting rivers, and sailing along the sea. Fjordland are going to be able to do this better than anyone else. They have extra free sea movement and extra distance when they move across the sea. So a big section like this over here on the ocean is the perfect place for them to cut around the side of the board and pop up somewhere where they either weren't invited or desperately needed, depending on the faction that you're playing and your opinion of the Fjord people at that time. So every one of these factions incorporates into the game state in their own unique and cool way. It really does create a very lifelike and very thematic play experience. Now, advanced plays is one of those things that I haven't seen a lot of other channels talk as closely about, and I'd love to mention a few elements of what happens in the advanced play that brings this game from an accessible war game all the way up to a heavy strategic combat-filled. I grew up playing Risk, right? I grew up playing these war games that really don't have a lot of depth to them. And I can just imagine myself now, and also as a kid, getting my hands on something like this that really allows me to control the combat and strategic decisions that are happening on the board. So, in advanced playing mode, first you can stack shits, which means you can have units that are grouped together, which completely changes the dynamic of how you have a marching force moving across the board and where and when you're able to leverage extra power to burst through or poke through some of your opponent's defenses. But beyond that, we're also going to be introducing heroes. Heroes are special characters. Each faction has their own set of heroes, and each hero has their own special abilities. Now, this gets really neat because depending on what hero gets summoned in what location, you can change how your factions are interacting, how they're moving, when and where they're gaining advantages and extra attack power, and you get to bring them into the story. Heroes don't work by themselves. They have to be with another unit or another tribe in order to operate and function, but they start modifying the game board in really tactical ways and might make you and your other players change strategy. Also, with the amount of heroes that every faction has, there's a lot of variability that comes into the advanced gameplay that you don't see as much in the intro sessions. I could play through any of these factions, and depending on the hero that I summon out in certain areas, that will change the way that the gameplay flows, the areas that I have strength, the positions that I lose in certain strategic battles. Along with that, you saw underneath these hero cards called blessings. Blessing cards are the special specifics that every player gets related to the god or the deity that they serve. These blessings will be alongside your magic and treasure cards, your spell and treasure cards, and they'll give you a unique advantage based on what blessing card you have in your hand, when and how you can activate its special ability, and what faction you're playing. Because like I said, every single faction has their own unique set of heroes and their own unique set of blessings. Moving over to, let's say, the main board here, something you're not going to see in the basic gameplay but is here in the advanced gameplay is going to be these wandering creatures popping up. These are going to be different types of creatures that are spawned either from spells or blessings, or spawn on their own in various different crypts and caverns in the ocean or on land. They're creatures that you can attack and fight in order to gain a little bit of gold, and really it's a small adventuring party breaking off from the larger pavilion that you have, trying their best to bring back riches and whatever other loot they can find. It's the heroes going on a hero's journey. These change the dynamic of the game quite a bit as well, because your opponents, whoever's sitting across the table from you, will be controlling the ones that spawn near you, or the ones that you're fighting. That means that they will be directing them to attack, pillage, and wreak havoc on your troops, your armies, and your towns. It's a neat little twist and gives them a little bit more direct interaction behind enemy lines. Depending on what creature pops out, this could be a thing where you literally turn a force around in order to deal with them and not have someone controlling them behind the scenes. Now, the last two things I want to highlight are the ability to mix in spell cards, which is a shared spell deck, which, if you know the nature of spell cards, they just come in at clutch moments, allow you to do things like teleport, jump around, add strength, bring a monster out. They give you more agency over the game and more strategical actions to take that can be surprising to other players around the table. And finally, treasures. Treasures are going to be special relics that you find sometimes from hunting creatures, oftentimes from drawing them up. And when you play or utilize these treasures, you'll set them down in front of you. Now, they also can convert to gold at the end of every season, which is an important thing we need to talk about next. The game is played across a series of seasons. Some shorter campaigns will just be summer, spring, and spring, summer, and autumn. Other games will last for 6 rounds or longer. Now, in advanced gameplay, you'll be mixing in the winter season as well, where everything across the board, the monsters go away, your money resets, you get rid of your treasure, and you keep only the bare minimum. You know, a frozen wasteland happens, and then you bring back and re-engage in the spring. The game plays across a series of seasons, and some game sessions might only be 3 or 4 seasons long, meaning you might have some sessions that are just a few turns apiece, allowing you to resolve and actually complete a full game cycle in something like 60 to 90 minutes. Really, really accessible, very, very satisfying. In fact, the gameplay over by the Brothers Murph is only about a 45-minute gameplay, and that's with them directing you and letting you know what's happening on the board as they jump into it. So that's the core structure, that's the core heart and soul of Burning Banners. A very, very interesting game with a lot of things going for it. Beautiful artwork, accessible gameplay, and a depth of strategy that you usually find in war games that are not themed in a way that is this pleasant. Really, if you're interested in war games, or if you love war games and you're thinking about picking this one up, I'd say go check out more information about it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's compelling me here. I can't wait to sit down with Shira and play some of the more advanced scenarios that we haven't been able to dive into yet. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. Get out and play some games. We'll see you next time. Bye.